Hey Ms. Cards, Dimitri here with my video journal conference. I figured it'd probably be a little bit easier on the both of us if I just filmed from this aspect and kind of gave you a visual way to look around when you have my journal rather than just taking a video of me and giving you instructions. Around the edges I have little tabs labeled 1 through 5. You can go in any order you want. I just labeled them for sake of being able to be easily identified by myself when I'm going through this. But you can go through any way you want. I have two Nabokovs, which are these lightly colored pinks right here. I have one Wendler, which is this dark pink, two Frost, which are this yellow color, and a Prime, which is this blue color. So you can just pick from around from there, and I'll go through them and kind of talk about them. I guess I should probably start with my thesis. Before I get to that, I just want to know or acknowledge, really, that I understand it's going to be a little bit difficult doing this because I'm not going to have you there to ask me questions. I'm not going to be there to answer your questions. So I'm going to try to be as clear and as concise as I can throughout this video. And hopefully it will be not too difficult to follow or comprehend or anything. I know that I'm kind of all over the place when I talk, so hopefully we can kind of avoid that altogether. I know that it's kind of a risk to do the video thing instead of a journal conference, but I figured it's a good way to practice my skills of being able to not have my teacher sit there and guide me through it. And even though I know you usually sit there quietly, there's always, a couple questions you ask, and I want to try to be able to challenge myself to be able to just kind of do it all on my own with no one there and just kind of go through it. So we'll start with my thesis, and my thesis is, as a developing critical reader, I have taken steps to improve my skills of visualizing content, identifying an author's tone, analyzing metaphors, and lingering in details. I am conscious of the changes I have made in my effort to succeed. So yeah, that's my thesis, and we'll start right away with Nabokov. I'll flip to the little tab here. My journal does have drawings all over the place, but I'll try to ignore them. I know they're kind of in your face, but for the first one, for visualizing for Nabokov, that was the skill that I used. I talked about this drawing that I did of Kathy while I was reading Never Let Me Go, and despite the fact that it may seem like something I just did for a doodle, I think that this is a skill that I've really started to do. I did it again with Madame right there too, a little bit meaner looking. I did this because, for me, it's oftentimes difficult for me to be reading a book and creating characters myself. That's why a lot of times I prefer seeing a movie before I read a book, so I have an image of a character in my head. But with this class, I've been challenging myself more to kind of just create things out of my own mind and using the skills and the descriptions that are available to me of characters and settings, and be able to just kind of create them myself and kind of work through them. So I have this, drawing of Kathy that I did here, kind of just a really innocent, fresh face. Gave her some freckles, little button nose, kind of just how I pictured Kathy, this really innocent girl, and the way she's described, especially towards the beginning of the story. I didn't know much about her, and it was more difficult, but, it's something that I kind of worked through, and I think that it's a pretty useful literary skill, kind of combining it with an artistic skill. But nonetheless, I think that it really does demonstrate the ability to kind of create something from the descriptions that an author gives. So yeah, for my second point, I gotta close it and go back to it. Where's number 2? Right here. Is noticing a pattern. In Home Burial, you can feel free to lift these up because I know that they're going to be in the way. But in Home Burial, one of the patterns I noticed was the look, seeing, and sight, and just mentioning sight. And I think there was a pattern that we were able to notice. I think we talked about in class a little bit. But by lingering in the details of these words being repeated in the repetition, it forms a pattern that you're able to kind of connect back to the author's overall meaning, and kind of describing the different perceptions of the husband and the wife in this, and how they're different and they have a really different perception of the way they deal with things that's causing damage. And I think the author conveyed this through his repetition, this pattern he created of using the physical words of look, seeing, sight to kind of manifest that idea and make it easier for the reader to see and kind of note and play around with. So that was something that I noticed, and I know that I wasn't really doing that much before. It was really hard for me to see patterns. I mean, for me, patterns were something that was physically an occurrence that happened again, or something that happened again. It really wasn't. I really, didn't have an awareness of looking at words or anything like that to kind of create a pattern. So I think that's something that I've developed my skill and got a little bit better at, because I know I've done it in other areas too. For number 3 is Wendler, and this one is a little weird tab. It's backwards so that you can see it from the front. just kind of peel it off. And I did this for our individual poems we did in our groups, and I had mowing, and I talked about kind of the tone for this one and how I was able to kind of develop my understanding of theme through the tone and kind of noticing it. And I think that I did this a lot for this poem when I was working with Ashley, because we just started noticing how he had his attitude and tone. The author he was speaking very tenderly and sympathetically, and he was very caring through it. But the theme